Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's
Yes,
visible.
it is.
Okay, okay. So these were the problems which we can solve with the upcoming versions and the latest versions of C++. So now the major topic for today, which is programming paradigms. So let us first understand as what is programming paradigm. Programming paradigm simply means the style of programming. Okay, so since the beginning of computer sciences and especially the usage of high level languages, so there has been a lot of uh, changes according to the latest trends in the way of writing programs. So we have various methods of writing a program, which is monolithic programming, procedural programming, modular programming, object oriented, and aspect oriented. Now the fifth one, which is aspect oriented, that is used today in all industries, but this is a bit complicated, so we will limit ourselves to these four topics only. Object oriented, because object oriented and aspect oriented are the same, only the level of abstraction is more in aspect oriented. Okay, so let's have a detailed discussion on the first four methodologies. So the first one is monolithic. I've not written the code because actually monolithic programming is it is a kind of method of writing program, which means that you have a page and you have written the entire code just like an essay. So monolithic programming is a one man job. Only one person at a time can do monolithic programming. So and it was this time only in the earlier days when programming came into existence. So it was then only when people had a thought that yes, programming is actually an art. As a painter can, only one single painter can paint a drawing, not that single painting cannot be done in a teamwork. So similarly it was the case with monolithic programming, that only one single person can come and write the entire program. Okay, so this type of programming was not able to be performed in a teamwork. Then we moved a step further, which was procedural programming. Procedural programming, the best example for procedural programming is C programming language. Okay, so now what is procedural programming? So I'll give you an example. Let us suppose that you have a shop, a small shop, and a person is working there who actually owns that shop. So now that one single person is responsible for opening and closing of the shop, cleaning of the shop, and dealing with the customers and purchasing things for and maintaining his inventory. So everything is done by one person only. That is an example of monolithic, where only one person is responsible. But in procedural, what happens is we break down the work. So you can say this function one, function two. So now I have not told you anything about functions, but I'm just giving an example in order to understand procedural. So let us suppose that now the shop has grown up. Okay, now this shop is a bigger one. So the manager of the shop, he has some workers to help him. So let us suppose that this function one and function two, they are the workers, and this main function is the manager. So manager himself will not do any job, but his job is to make use of these functions, or I should say the workers, to get the desired output. So in procedural programming, it was a great revolution, you can say, because procedural programming can be done in a teamwork. So suppose if you have a team of 5 engineers, then each engineer or each programmer can be assigned to make one function. Okay, so for one function, one engineer is responsible to write the entire logic and to make that function run. Then similarly another engineer can make the another function, and after all the functions have been made, we can merge them together into one program and we can use it. And in the main function we can obviously call the functions as many times as we want. Function one, if I want function one more time, I can again call that function. So this is procedural programming. Now modular programming. So in procedural and modular there is not much difference. There is only one single difference. What is that difference? So the difference is that we all know what is a function. Function is a set of instructions which performs an operation on whatever the data we have provided. So as we know that function will perform operation on some kind of data. So where is that data? So that data is present over here. This is the data. Now, this is the difference between procedural and modular. In modular, we are able to create a structure. And in structure we can define our own data types. Okay, so these are the data, and if we want to use those data, we are free to use it in function 1 or function 2, or in whatever functions that we are having, we can use those data. Now the speciality of function in both procedural and modular is that once you create a function, you can use that function in the same program or in another program on your same computer, or even you can send this function to some other programmers as well, and those programmer can utilize this function and use them in their programs. So this is the speciality of functions. So the only difference between procedural and modular is of structure, that in modular you can define your own data types. Okay, and these functions will act on these data to give you the output, and you are again in this case also you are able to call the function as many times as you want and make use of them. Now we have object oriented. Now in order to explain object oriented, I will make use of this modular only. In modular, what we were doing, we created function and we defined our own data types as well. Okay, so now this function is acting on this data. So why is this function outside this data type? If I have to use this same data and it is defined in a structure, then why can't I put this function inside the structure? So although this is not possible, so what we did is that we made a class. So this is the difference in object oriented programming, where we make a class and we encapsulate all the data types that we have created, which is user defined data and user defined functions. So we keep them together in a single piece, and that complete encapsulated portion, this entire thing, will be known as class. So now object oriented made the programming much easier. Now when you have a team of, let's say, again 5 programmers, each programmer can be assigned to make one complete class. Now in one class, now the engineer is completely free to decide what kind of data he want to use and what kind of functions he want to make, so he can make entire class. Now once all the engineers have made their uh, particular classes, we can use those classes, merge them into one single program, and we can make use of the program. So this is the difference between object oriented, modular, procedural, and monolithic. Now the thing to note is that whether it is monolithic, procedural, modular, or object oriented, the purpose of writing a program remains the same, and the logic behind writing the program also remains the same. Why are you writing the program? You have to do some work, so all the programs will do the same work, whether it is monolithic or it is other methods. Okay, so the uh, objective remains the same. What is changing is the way of writing the program. The way of writing the program. So the way of writing the program makes it easier to understand the code and write the code as well. So only this much is there in programming paradigms. So I hope that is clear to everyone. So please say yes or no if you are clear with all these 4 methodologies.
Yes, we are clear. Thank you, Ankit.
Okay. Okay, so now let's move on to another topic. But before compiler and interpreter, let me tell you the working of a computer, that how does a computer work. If we will understand that, only then we can differentiate between compiler and interpreter. Okay, so for that I will draw a diagram. So I'm drawing the internal part of the computer. So this is CPU, let's say this is CPU, and here you have the main memory. Okay, this is the memory. Now this is the memory. Okay, and here you have your files, or which we call as hard disk drive. Okay, this is the hard disk drive, HDD. Nowadays we are also using SSD, solid state drive. So in HDD, what happens is you have all your files, all kinds of .exe files. You have all your files stored in HDD. Now here you have your output. So I'm writing output as OP, and here you have input devices which are connected to the computer. Okay. Okay. So now let's start the topic. So how computer works? In there we have CPU. CPU is also known as the brain of the computer, or we can say heart of the computer, or we can even call it as microprocessor. CPU is the microprocessor, correct? Now CPU is divided into two major parts. This is divided into two major parts. So the first one is ALU, arithmetic and logical unit, and second one is CU, which is control unit. So now remember this thing, that whenever you write a program, okay, whenever you write a program, that program has to be stored in the memory. Memory is what? Main memory, or you can call it primary memory. So your program will be stored in your primary memory. Okay, and all the process that has to be done on that particular program, that will be performed in the main memory only, in here. So let us suppose you created a program. Okay, before that I will tell you about HDD. One important thing, that HDD has different types of files. Now there are two types of files. Okay, so there are two types of files. There are program files. There are program files. Okay, and there are, which is represented as .exe file. Program files which are represented as .exe file, and you have data files. Data files. Okay, so you have data files. Now, what is the extension for this? I'll tell you. See, program files are what? In your computer, you click on the open that application, which is this PC or my computer. In there, go in local disk C, and you will find a folder which is program files. Sometimes it is program x86, something like that. Okay, so there you will find all the applications that you have on your computer. All those applications have a .exe file. .exe file is a machine coded file. Okay, so you have program files stored there. And data files, what are data files? So suppose you have one music application. Let us suppose you have a VLC media player, and you have some songs. So that VLC media player will be stored in your program files folder as the extension .exe. And all the music files that you have, the songs which you are going to play, those songs are known as data. .mp4, .mp3, or whatever it is. So they are known as data files, and the applications that you are going to use are known as program files. Okay, so whatever program you write, that program is finally converted to .exe file only, so that the memory can take it, fetch it from the HDD. Uh, okay, so now once you write a program, that program is stored in the main memory. After that, what happens is, sometimes you may ask the user to provide some input. So the user will provide the input maybe through keyboard usually. So input device can, the inputs that the input devices are providing, that cannot directly be stored in the main memory. So what is before that? So before that we have another memory which is known as input buffer. Okay, input buffer, IB, I will write it as IB. And similarly we have output buffer as well. Output buffer. Okay, so you can think of input buffer and output buffer as plates. So if you want something from the user, and if user will provide some input, those input will simply fall into these plates, and the main memory will come, fetch that data, and store in itself. After that, the central processing unit is responsible. Now let us understand these two portions, these two parts, ALU and CU. So what is the work of CU? CU's work is to control all the resources that it is having, operating system, input system, HDD, and all. Whereas ALU, which is arithmetic and logical unit, it has to perform some arithmetic operations and logical operations. So the program which you are having, so before giving the output, some operations it has to perform. So that will be done by ALU. After that, when the time is to give you the output, that output will directly fall into this output buffer. Then the output device, in whatever form you are going to get the output, it will come and fetch the data and display it on your screen, or in whatever form you want to get the output. So this is how computer works. So now I hope this is very much clear to you, the working of the computer. So now let's move on to the topic, compiler versus interpreter. Now this will be very easy for you to understand. Okay, so many times you have come across, and you must have heard that this C program or C++ is faster than Python or Java. So what is the reason behind this, or even JavaScript? So let us understand. So see, there is three things which is common between both compiler and interpreter. So what is that common thing? So First is that both of them will do error checking. Error checking. Sorry, I'm writing with mouse, so that is why. Bear with my handwriting. So first step that every both of them has to do is error handling. So they will check for if there is any error in your program or not. After checking the error, they have to convert it into machine code. So from high level code, they need to convert it into machine code. Because as I just told you, whatever program that you write, they will come into your main memory. Okay. Then central processing unit is responsible for the execution of the program. So in order to execute, first central processing unit has to understand what you have written. So that is why they need to be converted into machine code, that is binary form. Okay, so second step is to convert high level code into machine code, and this process will be done only if there are no errors. Then third part is the execution, and this is what makes compiler and interpreter different from each other. So let us understand. So see, this is a C++ program. Now you don't need to understand the code if you don't know about if you have not done programming at all. So I'm just telling you the differences. Okay, so this is a C++ program. Now, when you will try to run this program, what will happen is compiler will come and its first job is to check for errors if there are any. So let us suppose that in this line where I have written C out your sum is okay, something like that. So whatever it is. So let us suppose I have made some error over here. Then what will the compiler do? Compiler will come, read the first line, that is correct. So and so on, it will come onto this line. When it will read this line, this is incorrect. There is some syntactical error. Okay. Then it will simply terminate and will display an error on your screen. And it will not tell you where is the error. Now, that is a different thing that we are using some integrated development environments which have this feature that most of the time you actually get to know that in which line you have error. But compiler's work is not to tell you where is the error. It will simply, if there is error, it will simply terminate. So you have to correct it. Okay, now suppose you have corrected your errors. Now there are no errors. Then again, you will try to compile it. Then what will happen? A compiler will come, read your code. Okay, there are no errors. Then it will convert this high level code into machine code. So now see, your program is named as sum.cpp. This is .cpp is the extension for C++. So you have made a file and this is your HDD as I told you earlier in the working of a computer. Okay. So this is where all your files are saved. So once you make a program .cpp, suppose that is stored over here. Now the compiler checked for errors. There are no errors. Everything is correct. Now it converts this high level code into machine level code. So that machine level code is made with the extension .exe. Okay, this is the program file. Now this source code which you wrote is useless. Now nobody requires the source code because it was the only reason because you cannot understand binary and neither computer, and when I'm saying computer I mean cpu cannot understand your language. So compiler was there because the compiler can understand both the languages. So he converted high level to machine code and that machine code is .exe file. Now the memory will fetch this .exe file and the central processing unit will perform the function, whatever the process it has to do. Now keep this in your mind. Many people have this misconception that compiler is there while the execution is going on, which is false. Compiler's job is just to check for errors if there are any, and if there are no errors, then compiler will convert that high level code into machine code and its job is done. It is not responsible for execution of the program. Keep this in mind that compiler will never execute your program. It will simply convert your high level code into machine code and its work is done. Execution is done by central processing unit. It is done by the central processing unit. Okay, so this was all about compiler. Now let us have a look at interpreter. So I have given an example of interpreted language, which is JavaScript. And again, you don't need to worry about what this code has to do with. So just forget about that. Just understand the working of interpreter. So now JavaScript is an interpreted language. So it requires interpreter. Now I will tell you what happens in case of JavaScript. Now, as JavaScript is interpreted language, so it requires a browser because JavaScript is required for the development of web pages. Okay, for the development of web pages. So whenever on the internet you go and visit some web pages, so what happens behind the screen is that your browser is actually fetching all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. Then your browser, whatever, if you are using Chrome browser or whatever browser, they will read those files, understand it, and execute it. Then it will give you the output as how the website is looking. So now let us suppose you want to run that JavaScript file into Chrome. So in your computer, in your program files, you have chrome.exe file. Okay, chrome.exe file. I've not written Chrome, but it is a chrome.exe file. So because you have downloaded your Chrome browser, so its .exe file is present inside your computer. So in order to run these interpreted language, what you need to do is first you have to turn on your interpreter, which is in this case is your browser. So for JavaScript, you will first turn on your open your Chrome browser. So that Chrome browser will first come into the main memory and it is running. Okay. Then you want to execute this program. Now let us see how interpreter will come and read the code and do his stuff. So now as we know, the first step is to what? Analyze the program if there is any error or not, and then convert it to machine code. So interpreter will come and interpreter will do what? Read the first line. First line is correct. If it is correct, interpreter will then and there only it will convert it into machine code. And after converting to machine code, it will execute as well. Have you noticed the difference? The interpreter do what? It will read the first line. First line is correct. Immediately it will convert that line into machine code. And after converting to machine code, immediately it will convert into, it will execute that file, that particular line. Then it will come on to the next line. This line is also correct. Convert to machine code and execute it. Then suppose in this line you made an error. Now the compiler will come, there is an error. So it will not convert it into machine code and it will give you an error. So in case of interpreted language, it becomes very easy to identify where the error has occurred, be it any kind of error. So the interpreter, because the interpreter has executed the line before the errorsome line, so it will very easily tell you that, okay, I have found the error in this line, correct it. So it will correct the line. After that, again interpreter will come, read the first line, convert to machine code, execute it. And similarly it will do for the rest of the lines as well. So now the execution is being done by the Chrome browser. Chrome browser. So what does it mean? That JavaScript program that you have written is present inside the interpreter. It runs inside the interpreter. Interpreter in this case is your Chrome browser. That is reading the code, converting the code, as well as executing the code. Now you must have noticed that I have not written .exe file for your program. As in case of sum.cpp, this file is converted into .exe file. But this file, in case of JavaScript, I have not converted into .exe file. This is for Chrome browser. This is browser. This is not your program. Your program is this, which who has extension .js, JavaScript. Okay. So keep this thing in mind that interpreter never converts your program into .exe file. It will convert to machine code and immediately execute that file. Okay. So now let us analyze the differences. In case of compiler, you will generate a machine code file which is independent, and then the central processing unit is responsible for the execution. So the execution is done independently. After that, compiler is not responsible. And also one more thing, that once you compile your program, in case of compiled languages, once you compile your program, after compiling once, you don't need your compiler at all. You can run your program n number of times, but compiler is not required until and unless you make another change in your program. Otherwise, you don't need your compiler. But in case of JavaScript or any interpreted language like Python, each time you run your program, every time you will call the interpreter to read line by line, convert line by line to machine code, and execute them as well. So I will give you an example to explain this thing very easily. Let us suppose I give you a Chinese recipe. Okay, I will give you a Chinese recipe. Now, there are two persons, A and B. A and B both understand English only. They don't understand Chinese. But I understand both Chinese and English. So now let us take the scenario of A will come to me. He has to cook the food. Both of them are chefs. Okay, they come to me and ask for the recipe. So I have that recipe in Chinese. Now I convert that Chinese recipe into English. I write the entire Chinese recipe into English and hand it over to A. Now A will go, he's able to understand English, he will do whatever is written there in the English recipe, English version. He will go and perform all his task. But in case of B, what happens is, this is very important to listen. So listen very carefully. In case of B, what happens is, B comes to me, ask for the recipe. Now I am reading the first line, telling him in English, and I'm also getting that particular task done. So I'm reading first line. Okay, the first line says, bring this utensil. So I'm translating as well in English. Now B listens it, and I'm also telling him to do that task. So I am translating as well as getting it done. Similarly, I will go with second line. I will tell B, go and fetch this or do this. He will do. So I'm reading it as well, I'm translating it as well, and also getting it done. So now who will take more time? Obviously, the b b person will take more time, because he is completely dependent on me. He has to come to me every time to understand what is there in the next line. That is what happens with interpreted language. For each line, it is dependent on the interpreter. But in case of compiled languages, the central processing unit is not dependent on compiler. Once the compilation is done, now compiler is not required. He has the entire code in machine form, machine code, so he can directly execute it. So now the question is, who is faster now? So obviously, all the compiled languages are faster, okay, because they can do their work independently. They are not dependent on anyone. Now the second thing is, which type of program is easier to write and understand? So the easier one is interpreted language, because you can very easily identify where is the error made. Okay, so the interpreted languages are very easy. That is why people say that Python is very easy. Now, as I told you, that we have compiled languages and interpreted language, but there is a third type of language as well, which is hybrid language. An example of hybrid language, we have Java. Okay, we have Java, we have C sharp, or any .NET language. All of them are hybrid language. Now, what are hybrid languages? So let us take an example of Java. In Java, what happens is, hybrid languages have both compiler and interpreter. So in case of Java, compiler will come and convert the high level code into bytecode. And after it has been converted into bytecode is a program which is error free. So there is no error in bytecode. Then there is JVM, which is Java Virtual Machine, that is an interpreter. Now that will convert this bytecode into whatever the output that you want to get. So this, its work is to execute the program. So that was all about hybrid languages. There is nothing much, because we understand the working of compiler and interpreter. Now let us, so have you understood this compiler and interpreter? They're working. Please say yes or no.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Okay, so now the very important topic for today, which is number systems. We have to understand how to convert decimal to binary, binary to octal, octal to hexadecimal, and back to the other forms. So we have to understand this thing. Now, in binary, how many figures we have? We have 0, we have 1, 2 figures. In octal, we have 8 figures, 0 till 7. So we have total of 8 figures, which we can use. Then in decimal, which we humans use, decimal form. In decimal, we have 0 to 9, means we have 10 figures or 10 characters which we can use to represent the numbers. And in hexadecimal, we have 16, 0 to 9, then A to F. So these are the total number of figures present in hexadecimal. Okay. So now, very important thing to note is that in decimal form, what we do after 9, when we want to write 10, we use the combinations of the characters that we have. 1, 0, that means 10. But in case of binary, we have only 2 characters. So 0 will be represented as 0, 1 will be represented as 1. But what about 2? So for 2, we don't have a special character. So what we do is we write 1, 0. So in case of binary, 1, 0 means 2. Now, how did we achieve all these things? Okay, so let us look at this table. This table is very important. If you can learn this table, you can do any kind of conversion from decimal to binary, octal, hexadecimal, or back to each other. So let us have a look at these. So see, in decimal, after 9, in decimal form, after 9, we are using the combinations. So what is actually the logic behind this? After 9, we add 1. And for writing the next number, we have the digit 0 as well as 1. So we simply write 10. Okay. Now, the question is that if in binary 10 means 2 and in decimal 10, 10 means 1 0 means 10, then how can we differentiate between these? So in order to differentiate between these two, there is a method which is that we write base 10. Base 10 means it is decimal. For binary, we write base 2. Base 2 means binary. For octal, we write base 8. For hexadecimal, we write base 16. So this is going to help us in order to understand which number is binary, octal, or hexadecimal. So in case of binary, after 9, we added 1. Now let us look at binary language, binary number system. So we for 0 we use 0. For 1 we are using 1. For 2, how did we get 10? So this is a question. So after 1, in case of both decimal and binary, the representation is same. Now for 2 we should add 1, which is the logic that we are using in decimal form as well. So let's add 1 and let's see whether we get 10 or 1 0 or not. So when you add 1 plus 1, you should get 2. But we don't have any character to represent 2. So what do? We write 0 and 1 is carried. Then after, what do you add at 1? Nothing. So you get 1 0. So if this is the logic, let's check for other numbers as well. Let's take 4, which is represented as 1 0 0. Or let's add 1 to this 1 0 only. This is binary number 1 0, which means 2. Okay. And let's add 1 to it. And let's see whether we will get 3 or not. Now 0 plus 1 will get you 1, and we have the character for 1. Now 1 plus, there is nothing, so we'll get 1 1. 1 1 means 3. Similarly, add 1 to 1 1, okay, which is 3 in binary. 1, okay, let me write it somewhere else. Okay. So for 3, we have 1 1. Now let's add 1 to it. So 1 plus 1 will get you what? 2. But there is no character to represent 2. So we'll write 0 for it. 0. 1 is carried. 1 plus 1 is 2. Again, we don't have a character. So 0. 1 is carried. Again, 1 comes here and we get 100. 100 in decimal, 100 is the value. Otherwise, we'll call it 100, which means 4. Now, I will tell you some basic operations of binary, which are very basic. When you add 0 plus 0, you will get 0. When you add 0 to 1 or vice versa, you will get 1 because you have a character for it. I will tell you the same logic for octal and hexadecimal, then the answer will change. And when you add 1 to 1, you should get 2, but in binary, we don't have a character for that. So we'll write 0, 1 is carried, and we get 1 0, which is represented as 2, which means 2. Its value will be 2, but in decimal form, we call it as 10. So this was the, now let's do some conversions. Let's do some conversion, okay, to make the things very clear. Because today we are going to convert each and every number system back to each other. Okay, so just a minute. I will do the conversion right now. Okay, so now let's take any decimal number. Let's say 259. 259. Now, how do we represent them in decimal form? I can write it as 2 into 100 plus 5 into 10 plus 9 into 10 to the power 0. Or so similarly, I can say 9 into 10 to the power 0 means 9 into 1. 5 into 10 to the power 1 means 50. And in case of 2, I can say 2 into 10 to the power 2. This will get you 200. 200 plus 50 plus 9 will get you 259. So similar is the case with binary as well. So if you have a number, let's say 10110, and you want to know that what does this number represent, what we should do is, see, I will tell you why we are using 10 over here. Why can't we use some other number? It is because in decimal number system, we have 10 figures, 0 to 9. That is why we are using 10 to the power 0, 10 to the power 1, 10 to the power 2. So similarly, for this, which is binary number, we will say 0 into 2 to the power 0 plus, because in binary we are having two characters only. That is why we are multiplying with 2 power 0. Then we have next character, which is 1. So 1 into 2 to the power 1. Similar is the case with decimal number system as well. Then plus 1 into 2 to the power 2 plus 0 into 2 to the power 3 and 1 into 2 to the power 4. So what is the answer? 1 into 2 to the power 4 will get you 16, plus 0 into something is 0. So plus 1 into 2 to the power 2 will get you 4, plus 1 into 2 to the power 1 will get you 2, plus 0. So this is equal to what? 22. So this is the number that you get. This is the decimal number that you get. So this was the conversion from binary to decimal. Let us see this for other numbers as well. Other numbers as well. Okay. We'll take the topic to another level. Just a minute. Now, let us convert a decimal number to binary number. If I give you 30, so I should write base 10 in order to differentiate that, okay, this is decimal number system. Now, if I want to convert this number to binary, what is the trick? So the working method is divide 30 successively. So divide this number 30 by 2. Why I'm dividing by 2? Because in binary number system, we are having only two characters. So divided by 2. So by 15 times, I divide, okay? And there is, remainder is 0, okay? Then divide 15 by 2 again. So 7 times 2 will get you 14 and the remainder is 1. Again divide by 2, you will get, here you get 2 times 3 will get you 6 and again the remainder is 1. Divide 3 by 2. So 2 times 1 will get you 2 and the remainder is again 1. And for dividing 1, 0 times the remainder is again 1. Now from bottom to top, arrange these numbers. So what you will write? 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. And this is equal to 30 in case of decimal number system. This is how we convert a decimal number into binary number. What are we doing is, you have the number, divide successively by 2 if you want to convert it to binary, because in binary we are having only two characters. Okay, so this was the case for the conversion of decimal number into binary number. Now let us see for other number systems as well. Now let us see, you have 13 decimal number system only and you want to convert it into octal. So how will you do that? That is also easy. So divide 30 by 8. The concept is same. Why by 8? Because in octal number system I am having 8 number of characters. So divide it successively by 8. So when you divide 30 by 8, so 8 threes are 24. So your remainder is what? 6. Again divide 8 by, divide 3 by 8. So 0 times the remainder is 3. Okay. Now arrange these numbers from bottom to top. So this 30 will be equal to 3, 6 base 8, means octal. So in octal, you have the figure 3 and you have the figure 6. When you will write them together, that is equivalent to 30. That is equivalent to 30. So this is the method for conversion of decimal number into octal. Now, let us try to convert this number into hexadecimal. So the same is the concept. You will divide it by 16. Why 16? Because total number of characters that you have is 16. 0 to 9 is 9 plus A to F, which is 6, will get you 16. So 16 characters are there. Divide 30 by 16. So 16 times 1, when you will divide it, your remainder is what? 14. Okay, 14. Now divide 1 by 16, 0 times, and your remainder is again 1. Now arrange these numbers from bottom to top. So when you will arrange these numbers from bottom to top, you have 1 and 14. But check hexadecimal. Do you have 14 number here? No. You have only 0 to 9. So what is the meaning of 14? So from here you can see in decimal number system, 14 means E. So you will write 1, and for 14 you will write E. This is the representation of 30 in hexadecimal. So in hexadecimal, divide by 16, and whatever the decimal number you are getting over here, look up into the table what is the representation for that particular number and write it. So 1E is equal to 30. So this was the decimal to binary, decimal to octal, and decimal to hexadecimal. Now let's check this for another number systems as well. Okay. So now this time we will do the conversion from binary to decimal. First we'll do binary to decimal. So let us say you have a number 11110 base 2, means this is a binary number. How can we convert this number to decimal number system? So that is very, very easy. Just make a box, okay, and count the number of characters that you are having. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 characters. So make 5 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And divide this box into 2 halves. Then write down all these characters into each box. 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. And this is a binary number. You want to convert this number into decimal number system. So what you will do is simply multiply the number, first number by 2 to the power 0, 2 to the power 1, 2 to the power 2, 2 to the power 3, and 2 to the power 4. When you will multiply 1 with 2 to the power 4, similar with all the numbers, you will get your answer. So 16 into 1, 2 to the power 4 means 16. So 16 plus 2 to the power 3 means 8, plus 2 to the power 2 means 4, plus 2, and plus 2 power 0 means 1. Add these numbers, this will get you 0, because 0 multiplied by 2 to the power 0, which is 1. So 0 into 1 will get you 0. So this is 0. Now add these numbers. So 16 plus 8 will get you 24. Then plus 4 will get you 28. Plus 2 will get you 30. So to represent the decimal number 30, which is base 10 in binary form, this is the representation. So this was conversion of this binary number to decimal number. Now let us try to convert octal to decimal. So till now we have seen the conversion from decimal to binary, octal, hexadecimal, then binary to decimal. Now let's see octal to decimal. How can we do that? So let us suppose in octal we have 36 base 8. We have this number 36 base 8. This is octal number, and we want to convert this octal into decimal number system. So how can we do that? So same method is same for this as well. Make a box, count the number of characters. We have 2 characters, so divide this into 2 uh, boxes, and do a half of that rectangle. Now write these characters 3, 6. Now as in octal we have total number of characters is 8. Total number of characters is 8. So we will write 8 to the power 0 and 8 to the power 1. So 8 into 3 will get you 24, plus 8 power 0 means 1. 1 into 6 will get you 6. This is equal to 3, 0, 30. And we have converted this number to decimal. So when you write 3, 6, this is equal to 30 in decimal form. And decimal is base 10. This is base 8. Okay. So now similarly, let's do another calculation, which is hexadecimal to decimal. How can we do that? So in hexa, let's say we have 1E. This is in hexa. And we want to convert this number to decimal. How can we do that? So again, let's make another box. divide it into two parts. Okay, write 1 over here and write E over here. We want to convert this to decimal number system. So 16 power 0 and 16 power 1. So 16 into 1 will get you what? 16 plus 16 power 0 is 1. 1 into E will get you E. 16 plus E. Now 16 plus E is equal to what? Let's check. So this is E and this E is equal to 14. So let's write 14 over here. When you add 16 plus 14 will get you 30. So this is the representation in hexadecimal. This is decimal form. 30 in decimal is represented as 1E in hexadecimal. So now we are very much comfortable in conversion from decimal to binary, octal, hexadecimal, and vice versa to decimal. Now let's check how can we convert octal to binary and binary to octal. How can we do that? Let's check that. Okay. So just a minute. We'll start with that. Okay. So now let's take any number, octal number. Let's say 125. This is octal number. Okay, this is an octal number because in octal we have 1, 2, and 5. Okay, and we want to convert this octal number to binary number. So how can we do that? So write 1, 2, and 5. Okay, now from the table, check how 5 is represented in case of binary. So for 5, let's check 5. 5 is represented as 101. So let's write 101. Let's check for 2. For 2, we have 10. So we'll write 10. Let's check for 1. For 1, we have 1. Okay, so we'll write 1. But the thing to note is here you have 3 digits, but here you have only 2 digits, and here you have 1 digit. So the trick is that make all the digits, all the numbers equal in the number of digits. So here you have 3 digits. So add 1 0, leading 0 over here, because 0 doesn't mean anything. Add 2 zeros over here. So now all the numbers are in 3 digits. Now arrange these number from left to right. So you will write 1 because leading zeros is equal to nothing. So 1 0 1 0 1 0 1. This is binary form. So 128 is represented as this in binary. And this is the method. First, write the numbers like this and check in the table what each number is represented as in the form of binary. And write the numbers and you get the binary representation. Okay. Okay. So now let's convert binary to octal. If you have a binary number, how can you convert that binary number to octal? So let's use the same number 10101001. This is your binary number and you want to get the octal equivalent. How can you do that? So just write this number first. 10100101. Now there is a important concept to keep in your mind. Let's check the table. Let's first study the table carefully. Only then we will be able to do this conversion. So in binary, you have only 2 numbers, right? After that, you do the repetition or combinations, you can say. In octal, you have 0 to 7, means total of 8 characters. And 7 is equal to 7 in decimal. After that, you get double digits. Started getting double digits. Now till 7, you can notice in binary, you have maximum of 3 characters. Maximum of 3 characters. Okay, for 6 you have 3 characters, for 5 you have 3 characters, for 4 you have 3 characters. So maximum of 3 characters. After 7, octal got 2-digit number, and for binary we got 4-digit number. So this is the trick. Now what we will do is we'll start making the bundles of 3 digits. So this is your binary number. Start making the bundles of 3 digits. So these are the 3 digits. Start making the bundle. 0101. Start making the bundles. And here you have left with only 1 digit. So add 2 leading zeros and make it another bundle. Okay. Now let's check what is 101 equal to in case of octal. So see, 101 in binary is equal to 5 in octal. Correct? So let's write 5 over here. Let's check for 010. 010, I can say 10, right? Because leading 0 is not equal to anything. So 10 means 2. Let's write 2. And 001 means what? 1. So it is 1. So it is equal to 125. And in the earlier question, we converted 125 to this number. And so we can say we got the correct answer. And this is octal representation. So this is how we convert a binary to octal. First, write all the binary number like this. Make pairs of 3. Why 3? Because when octal is getting 2 digit, before that, binary has maximum of 3 digits. So that is why we were making 3 bundles of 3. Okay, so this is the method. Now let me give you another question so that you can be clear with the concept. So let's solve one more question to convert a binary to octal. So let's say you have a number 101101110. This is your binary number and you want to convert this number to octal. How can you do that? So simple. You just make the pairs of 3. So 10110110. Okay. Now let's make pair of 3. So this is pair of 3 and okay, now add 10 and you get this bundle. Now what is 110 equal to? Let's check the table. Let's check the table. Let me raise these things. So 110 is equal to 6. Don't check the decimal. Don't check the decimal number system. We are dealing with binary and octal. So 110 is equal to 6. Although in decimal also it is same, but we have to keep this thing in mind, okay? Because in hexadecimal it will create trouble. So 110 is equal to 6. Then again 110 is equal to 6. And this 010 means 2 because this leading 0 is not equal to anything. So 10 is equal to 2. So add 2. So it means we got the number 266 in octal. Okay. So this is the representation. You can even check it in your scientific calculator. You will get the same answer. Okay. So this is the trick. Now let's move on to hexadecimal to binary and binary to hexadecimal. This is very important. So let us suppose we have a hexadecimal number which is 2a base 16. When I write base 16, it means it is hexadecimal. Let's check for its binary equivalent. How can we do that? So write 2 and a separately. Now let's look for a in hexadecimal. Here is a. It is equal to what? Okay, now here also I will tell you one very important concept. In binary, we are having 2 digits, only 0 and 1. In hexadecimal, we are having 16 characters till F. After F, we started getting double digits. 2 digit number in hexadecimal starts after F, means after 16 characters, we get 2 digit number. Now, so it means that for F and before F, what is the maximum number of digits that you use in case of binary? You use maximum of 4 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 characters. So that is why in this case you have to pick up that many numbers. Okay. So okay, I will tell you how to do that. So let's check for the equivalent of A. This is A and this is the number 1010. So let's write 1010, 4 digits. Now for 2, here is hexadecimal 2 and let's check for its binary equivalent. It is 10. It is 10, but we'll have to add 2 leading zeros in order to make it 4. Now what is the procedure? Arrange these number from left to right. If you will keep this method of making all the numbers 4 digits, it will help you in the another conversion. So we will get 101010 because these 2 leading zeros is equivalent to nothing. And this is what binary representation. So you have your hexadecimal number, just separate them, check for their equivalent in the binary number system, write them, arrange them. You got your binary number from hexadecimal to binary. Okay. Now let's convert binary to hexadecimal. This is tricky, which I just told you right now. Okay. Let me raise them as well. Okay. So let us suppose you have your binary number, which is 101010 base 2. This is your binary number. Now you want its hexadecimal equivalent. How will you do that? So as I just told you that before this F and before F, maximum number of binary digits 4. Count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Although it is reducing upwards, but maximum we have 4 characters. After that, we do the repetition 1, 0. See, 0, 1 we have in hexadecimal. We use the combinations that we use in decimal form after 9. So we will make the pair of 4. So let's write 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Start making the bundles of 4. Okay, so these are the 4 numbers. Now here we have only to add 2 zeros, 2 leading zeros. Let's check for what does this number mean. 1, 0, 1, 0. So this is 1, 0, 1, 0. It is equal to what? A. So let's write A. Binary to hexadecimal we are doing. Now here we have 0, 0, 1, 0. 0, 0, 1, 0, which is 1, 0, equivalent to what? 2. Let's write 2. So it means that in hexadecimal we get 2A and the base will be 16. So this is binary to hexadecimal conversion. Okay, so I hope this much is clear. Please say yes or no so that I can move to another topic, another conversion.
Yes, it is clear, Ankit.
Okay, so now we are going to do another last, this is the last conversion. After that, the session will be over, which is octal to hexa conversion. And now I will like to tell you that there is no direct conversion from octal to hexadecimal and vice versa, means hexadecimal to octal. There is no direct conversion. So suppose you have a octal number, let's say 276. Okay, you can do it right now because I have told you all the conversions required to do this. So you have this octal number. You have this octal number. Now, how will you do the conversion? So the method is you want to convert it to hexadecimal. So first you need to convert this octal number to binary and then from binary to hexadecimal. So I think you all can do it on your own right now. So I will give you one example and the another conversion you can do as your task, you can say. So this is 276. This is the octal representation. And first we have to convert it to binary. First to binary and then only we can reach to hexadecimal. Okay, so this is the number. Let's check for 6. How do we write 6 in binary? So for 6 we have 110. So we'll write 110. This is octal, this is 6, correct? For 7, go in octal table. This is 7, this is the representation 111. For 2, in octal table, this is 2, this is the binary representation 10. Now you have this number. This is the binary form. Now you can write it as 101111110. This is the number that we got from octal to binary. Now we want to convert to hexadecimal. So how many numbers we have to make the bundles of? 4 digits. 4 digits, 4 digits. So now 1110. Let's check what is it equal to. 1110 is equal to E. Okay, in hexadecimal we have to see 1110 in binary. Hexadecimal equivalent is E. So we'll write E. Then we have 1011. 1011. This is binary number. This is hexadecimal representation, which is B. So its representation is B, E, and base 16. This is the conversion. So I hope everything is clear. All conversions now you can do. So if you are working on some circuits in electronics, in case of numbers, you can do it very easily now. Now I'm giving you a task, very simple question, which is 1C8 and hexadecimal number it is. You have to convert this hexadecimal number to octal. And I'll tell you the method. First convert this hexadecimal number, this is 1C8, convert this number to binary, and then from binary you can get back to octal. So I hope in today's session you understood everything. So is everything clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So that was all for today's session. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next session. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ankit.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed the session today.
Well, all of us did, and thank you so much for the from the Team.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Ankit, we enjoyed a lot. It was an awesome session with you.
Okay, in next session, we'll start from the next session, we'll start doing actual programs. We'll start writing the programs. Okay. So, yeah, so from next session, we'll see the skeleton of C++ program, and I will introduce you with enum, type def, and some data types. And after that, we'll be completely involved in writing some various programs. And at the end, we'll be making one mini project as well. So thank you all for joining today's session, and I hope it was very informative for you all. So meet you in the next session. So you all can leave now if it is over now.